Hello and welcome to another week, another edition, another episode of The Giant Pod with me, Andy Rintmore. My guest this week is Clive Stocker. Clive is one of my most respected and loved friends, associates, affiliates, whatever you want to say. Clive was my music lecturer at City of Bath College, where I studied for about 4 years. He is also the author of How to Become a Confident Performer. He has one of the greatest sets of ears I've ever seen in practice, and he is also a Toastmaster master. We talk about public speaking, we talk about performing, we talk about how to overcome stage fright and fears and doubt and failure, how to prepare for public speaking events. We talk about challenging yourself, teaching techniques, the subtle, dark art of manipulation to get people to overcome their own fears and self-doubt and achieve the things that they want to achieve. We talk about educating as a process, as a way of life, as a philosophy, if you want to go that far. Talk about Glenn Gould, the famous pianist. We talk about his life. We talk about specifically the Goldberg Variations and how he had two different approaches at different stages of his life to playing the works of Bach. We talk about loads of stuff. It's a really, really good chat. I was so pleased to catch up with Clive after probably about 8 years, I think, and have this conversation. I really hope you guys are going to enjoy it as well. So without further ado, here it is, a man I deeply admire and respect, Clive Stocker. So where does it all begin for you, Clive? Because I think you've got one of the finest set of ears I've had the pleasure of knowing, really, to be honest. And I'm just wondering how one acquires ears so acutely tuned and worked on.
Well, that's a really, really good question. I think when I was about 6, we had this thing called the Bentley test at school. And what it was a vinyl LP that they put on, and you had to write down 40 different pitches and say whether they were sharper or flatter. And apparently I got them all correct, all 40.
Wow.
So when I was about 6 or 7, and they said, oh, you probably should play the violin. And I didn't at the time, but I think that was when I realised, maybe something different about my ears. I don't know why, and I think that's obviously gone on to being very fussy and shouting at people for being out of tune.
I do remember when we were studying in college, and of course you were one of the senior lecturers, and we would do those playthroughs on the Friday afternoon. And it would just be sometimes, not always. There was a lot of talent there, and a lot of the people from that sort of era of college have gone on to do some really cool things. But I remember, like, sometimes it just the biggest dirge, just the biggest ding, and you would put your hand up Simon Cowell style at the back and halt the first sort of minute of the performance, and you'd say something like, your E string is slightly flat, and it just some like heavy metal guy with his hair all over his pickups just sort of like, huh? Am I? Huh? And, without doubt would whack the tuner on and have a fiddle and then be like, oh yeah.
I think you get, that is just the experience having done that for, well, with you, when you were there, about 12 years, and you could tell which string was out of tune. And rather than say, hey guys, just retune, you just say, yeah, your G string's a bit flat or sharp or whatever, and then it just saves a bit of time, really. But I think it's just that having that initial ear, and then also practicing it every single week. I just want people to get better, and I think that is who I am and how I kind of operate, really, which is probably at the centre of the book.
Yeah.
Which is about people getting better at what they're doing.
And that book is spawned from was this a PhD you were doing, or what were you doing? A doctor's?
No,
Doctoring?
I did a master's degree in music technology, and I enjoyed it, but I got a little bit fed up with having to do lots of academic note taking and references and all these sorts of things. I got a little bit bored with doing that. So I thought, okay, I'm either going to do a PhD, but I couldn't face the academic side of it, or I'm going to write a book. Because I was hurtling towards the age of 40, and the book won.
So you wrote the book called How to Become a Confident Performer. I do remember sending you a little quote for that, and it didn't make it in, but that's okay.
Oh, well, I tell you what, in volume two.
Yeah. So how did you find the experience of writing the book? Because you've said, I don't want to do anything academic with this master's degree. Yet you go and do what I consider really to be one of the most academic things, which is write a bloody book.
Well, what I wanted to do was, from all that experience with all of the playthroughs and all of the coaching of different performers over the years, you learn a lot of skills and lots. I have to say, not necessarily skills, but tricks, because a lot of them are tricks about getting people to do something and get them to do it on stage and gain that confidence. And it really is about. A lot of that stuff is not necessarily academic. And I think that's partly why I thought I'm not going to write an academic thesis, because a lot of these things, they don't have deep psychological background and research and all that kind of stuff. It's just something that I tried and it worked. And some of that has basis in neuro-linguistic programming. And then some of it is other books that I've read, or it's just actually, I wonder if I say this to them, I wonder if it will get them on stage and get them performing. And, for example, one of the lads was so nervous. He just said, I can't, it was before the Christmas performance. He said, I can't go on. I can't do it. I said, well, look, I'll tell you what, if you leave now, you'll be able to get the bus, back to Frome, which is, obviously a place that reasonably well. So if you go now, you can get the bus and you can be back in Frome for EastEnders. And the look on his face was really confused. And what? Well, I don't want to go home. I said, okay, well, if you don't want to go home, that must mean that you want to be here. And if you're going to be here, you might as well perform. So what do you reckon? Do you want to stay here and perform, or do you want to go home? And he went, perform, I think. And he looked confused, and he got on the stage and he performed, and he looked confused throughout the entire performance, but he did it. And then he came up to me afterwards and said, he dropped the F-bomb. So he said, "You're a fucker, you are," but he kind of had a smile, in between the expletives. So it's just stuff like that,
So you use the power of suggestion.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, all sorts of different.
Is saying the power of suggestion maybe perhaps giving it less credit than it's due? Is it? Are you practicing a much deeper, more thought out process there, or are you literally just trying to contrast something for someone?
Well, you can do both things, really. I mean, there's lots of different techniques that you can use. I mean, one of them is put the dead dog on the table, which is basically give somebody an option that you think would be good for them, and they will really want to do themselves, or something that really stinks, like this dead dog on the table. So I would give them these two options, and then they would pick the one that really was better for them. That's a little bit of manipulation. And I think teachers are one of the most manipulative people on the planet, for sure.
Right. And what made you want to go into teaching? So they said to you, okay, you got all these 40 questions right on the, what was that test called?
It's called the Bentley test.
The Bentley test. And so how do you find yourself in teaching, teaching prodigious, talents such as myself,
Of course,
and others.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, you were great. You were really, really good. Obviously, you're rubbish now, but I mean, you were good then. Well, how did I get into teaching? That's a really good question. When I was doing my music degree, we're getting towards the end, and a lot of people had studio projects that they had to finish. And I just thought, I love being in the studio. And I thought, well, if I hang around in the studio, I can help all the people who hadn't set one foot in the studio, and I can probably just help them, support them. And I had probably the best 2 weeks of my life up until that point. And I just thought, I'd like to do something like this, but I don't know if it would be teaching, because I think it'd be a bit scary. And then a few years later, I did my PGCE and became a teacher.
So before that, did you have sort of aspirations to be a professional musician, or a rock star, a session guy, a jazz superstar? Where were you going with this? Was it just because you had a love of music and an affinity for it?
Well, I think initially, when I was 16 or something, I changed the piano teacher, and she auditioned me a couple of years before and said, well, why don't you have have lessons from one of my piano pupils who's rather good. And he is really good, and I learnt a lot about pop music and really got into that. But then he gave up the piano, and she said, well, do you want to take his teaching slot? I said, yeah, that'd be great. And she had no idea that I'd kind of progressed so much. And she said, I really wished you'd come to me a couple of years ago. And I said, well, I want to play all these different pieces. And I listed them off. And she said, well, we better get busy then. And she just said, okay, let's play all these pieces. And then after doing that, a few different pieces, I said, I'd love to be a concert pianist. And she said, okay, well, we'll have to get you grade 8, and we'll have to get you the audition pieces together. And I said, okay, fine. So, and it was just this idea. If I wanted to do it, then she would just say, yeah. She wouldn't say that's too hard for you. And I went along to this audition thinking, okay, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. And I played amazingly, absolutely blasted. I played as well as I was ever going to play. And then I looked around at all the other people and what they were playing, and they were I was playing stuff that was quite reasonable, but compared to what they were playing, I was playing chopsticks. Compared to this big concerto type level stuff. And I realised, hang on a minute, I'm in a different league. I'm in the wrong league, and that's where, my world fell apart a bit there, really, because I didn't know what I was going to do. But all the time, when I went to Bath College, the Bath College of Higher Education, which was, what Bath Spa University is now, I didn't really know what the course was going to be about. And I just liked the driveway. And I thought, I thought it looks quite pretty. I'm going to come here. But actually the course was so people related. And I did lots and lots of singing with people, playing piano with people, producing, composing, the whole lot. And I think that is when I realised that, for me, music's good, but it's got to be about people.
Right. So it's the way that it brings people together when you're sort of consuming it and enjoying it, but also when you're sharing it and reveling in the process of music. Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. What were the pieces that you aspired to play? Can you remember some of them?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love Rachmaninoff, obviously big Russian composer, and absolutely adored that. And my piano teacher got me to play the Prelude No. 1, which was really difficult piece. I'd never played anything like it before, and that is what really got me on the path of thinking, maybe I can be, something else. But and I used to practice 3 or 4 hours a day, and really, really went for it. And then I think after a while, I think no, it was too solitary, and it wasn't really about people. And I think that's where it is for me. It's got to be people and music, and not necessarily in that order. I think can be either.
Right.
But,
What makes that Rachmaninoff so difficult? Because I know with piano, obviously, it's a two brain. It uses two sides of your brain, which not all instruments do. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, it requires. I mean, obviously, you know this with the drums. You have to have an awful lot of motor memory in what you do. So, and I know drummers practice and practice and practice until everything is so second nature they don't even have to think about it. And because I mean, a lot of those automation things, like using your left hand alongside your right hand, you have to have practiced that so much for it to become natural. And I think that is why there's a lot of complexity and independence with the hands within that piece and within the piano playing, I think. And it is that practice which lifts you into that next thing. It's the same with all the people with the practice pads. They're always outside on, doing their paradiddles and everything. And it's those people that really shine, don't they, at the top, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I was never a guy that sat and played on a practice pad for 8 hours a day. My drumming was always way more sort of therapeutic, and sort of any sort of skill came along after it. I mean, maybe I'm underselling myself. I mean, I wanted to be good, but I couldn't. I'm not the kind of guy that can sit there on a pad and do double stroke rolls for 6 hours a day or whatever. I know people that do, and it's incredible, and I have nothing but the maximum respect for them, and they are incredible players. But it's just like you said with your piano study, it's too solitary. For me, it's about creating something with others and having that chemistry in a band and playing and gigging and fun and rock and roll. I've never really been a big sort of student of the drums in that regard. But I wanted to get your opinion on something. Glenn Gould.
Oh yeah.
Are you a fan?
Massive fan.
Right. Because I've wanted to talk to someone about Glenn Gould for a while, because I've downloaded his Bach box set. And when I opened up the zip file, it was just unbelievable volumes of music in all different, in terms I don't fully understand. It just felt a bit foreign to me. But what I do understand is that he's got two versions of Bach. One that he plays as a young man, and one that he plays as an older man, and they call them the Goldberg Variations, don't they? And apparently they're very, very different pieces. I was wondering if you have the understanding of those recordings, if you could sort of tell me, like, how are they different? Because he's technically playing the same. He's playing the same music, isn't he? He's coming off the same hymn sheet, let's say, as he was. I don't know how many years there are between them, but it's probably a few decades. Yeah, they are. I think there's about 25 to 30 years between them. When he played the first ones, I mean, they're a particularly interesting piece, because the Bach wrote them. They were a commission for somebody, Count or King Goldberg, and he was an insomniac. And he said, I need you to write me something that my court musician can play that will get me to sleep. And he said, yeah, okay, I've got something I'm working on at the moment. I'll finish it. So he wrote it, and the idea it was just to get you to sleep. So there's lots and lots of repeats. There's two halves to each variation, and there's 32 variations, and each half is repeated. So you can imagine that's quite taxing on the listener. And one of the things that Glenn Gould would do was, when he started, he had an amazing facility to play Bach
with incredible independence. So and detachment with the lines. They sound like a sort of a digital sequencer rather than somebody playing it. And that was incredibly amazing to be able to play these very fast scales, with detachment. So there's sort of like little gaps in between all of the notes. So when he became famous, and he was a child prodigy, really, I think he'd learnt all of the Bach preludes, 48 preludes and fugues by the age he was about 10 or 11, I think. But and he could play them really, really fast, all of them from memory. By the time he went out and did the tour, he toured the Goldberg Variations, and people loved it on the tour. So when they got to the end of the tour, he recorded it. And I think it was with Columbia Records, and they said, right, go on, go for it. And he recorded it, and it was something like 40 odd minutes. And it really shouldn't be. It should be about an hour. But because he said, well, I was just tearing through it because that's how I did it. And people seemed to like it and were quite impressed by it. I mean, the interpretation is still good, but it's a little bit flashy, really.
Right.
And then when he got towards the end of his career, I think he gave up performing right at the end of his career. And he said, okay, I didn't do that any justice. I've just played it as quick as I could. And I want to bring a new interpretation to it, partly because the recording techniques had improved, and also his interpretation had improved. I mean, I prefer the original version because I think there's a reason why that one was bought, and it was the most popular classical recording, and it was in so many people's homes that I just think, yeah, there's some magic about that, real magic. So yeah, I think the second one, he does play more of the repeats, and it's a bit laborious.
Right. The way I sort of imagined it is that the first is that it shows an arc, I guess, of evolution and growth and maturity. That maybe this is reading into it a bit too deep. Perhaps we're heading into sort of super pretentious territory, but you know, the first recordings, you could say he's young, he's full of energy, full of piss and vinegar, and he wants to go at it. And this is how he's interpreted it as a young man. And then he has these decades of life experience, ups and downs, whatever. I don't really know his life, but I have a feeling he had a pretty sort of crazy artist life, didn't he? And then towards the end of it, perhaps when he's older, he's going through these in a different way with life experience and with hindsight, and perhaps playing them in the way that he feels them now, which I think is incredibly interesting. And I don't know if I'm sure there are artists that do that, but I don't know if they're quite as obvious as probably having one set of music recorded 20, 30 years after the
Well,
first.
interestingly, Nigel Kennedy did something similar with the Four Seasons. Back in the late 80s, he recorded it, and it was pretty out there, and that's why it sold a lot, apart from the fact he had some really spiky hair. And then he re-recorded it, and it's even more out there now, and about sort of 30 years later. So I don't know. I think there is something really magical about two interpretations, but he was unique in that, you know, hearing from his studio producers, he could go into a studio and he would have 2 or 3 completely different interpretations of those ready to record, and which I mean, it's really difficult to be able to do that for a piece that's about an hour long, to have 3 completely different interpretations, and you can switch between them. I mean, there are no other performers that I've ever heard of that can do that, and he had a very different brain.
Do you think these guys are the guys that are the sort of they're almost like the mad scientists of music, and they have very little sleep, and they live very fast and hard, and they're perfectionists and they're obsessive? Do you think these are those characteristics?
Oh, they absolutely, that you've described Glenn Gould. That is who he was. I mean, he was he had a real fixation with hand washing. He wanted to make sure that he took so many pills and things to keep himself well. And he wasn't like a drug addict, but he was, I need to be well. I need to take these tablets. If I don't take these tablets, I'm not going to be well. And he would be incredibly obsessive about everything. And, even the performance and the recordings and all of that. I mean, he used to listen to 2 or 3 radio stations at the same time in his house, because he said, look, my brain can pick these up, and I feel like if I don't do this, I'm going to be missing out, and I'm wasting a very good brain that can pick up 3 strands of information at any one time.
Oh my days.
So
that's incredible. Do you think these guys were possibly on like an autistic spectrum?
Yes. Socially, he definitely was on that spectrum, and there's been lots of stories. I don't think he ever married, and I don't think he had any relationships. So, but he was, very obsessive. He has some of those traits for sure.
Right. And what's your experience teaching? Because when I was at college, there was a number of students there. I'm not going to be naming any names, but there's a number of students there who were autistic and on the spectrum. And I remember the intensity in which they loved their instrument and how they knew it inside out, and they knew their genre. And how is your experience teaching people like that? Do you often find that they teach you a lot more than you feel you teach them?
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, another good question. When I started teaching, I didn't really know, well, I don't think that Asperger's, didn't really know much about it at all. And when I ran into some of the students, I had no idea. This is when I first started teaching. I had no idea how to tackle it. I didn't know what it was, and I didn't listen to the students, and I didn't do them any favours at all. And I hate to say that, but and I think as I went through, I just realised that you had to listen to the student and find out what they were thinking and why they thought the way that they did. And as soon as you start to do that, you start to gain an understanding, and then you can lead them and know where their limitations are. And I think it, and then you start, you forget that they have, that they're on the spectrum, and you just carry on. Think, oh, that's how they work, and actually some students who have that are more straightforward in some ways than the ones who come across as very easygoing, and they'll that's cool, and then actually they're much more difficult in some ways to find out how they're thinking and how they're feeling.
It's definitely an honesty that comes with a lot of people I meet and have met who are on the autistic spectrum or have Asperger's. I find them to be very honest people. They tell you, they don't mess around, and they will just tell you how they're feeling, or oh, I'm not enjoying this, and things like that. and it's amazing when you get them, when you find out what it is that really makes them not tick, but like really interests them and really puts them in that place in their mind that they love. And I'm on the spectrum for sure. I've got ADHD, and I mean, you've taught me for 3-4 years. I mean, you absolutely know I'm on the spectrum. But it's great when you get them talking about their new guitar or this band that they love, and just all this information, incredibly detailed information, very articulate. The recall is incredible, and I love minds like that, and I love brains like that when they get onto their specialist subject, especially if it's one that I also enjoy. I just find the potential of non-neurotypical minds when in their proper field to be limitless.
I think, I totally agree. And I think that's part of the reason why I love teaching the pop course, because you know what everyone's thinking, because they'll tell you and they'll come up to you and they'll shout it in your face. And some of my other sort of colleagues were like, man, they come to one of our playthroughs and it would often get quite heated. You know, if somebody hadn't performed, or they were mucking about, or they were being rude, or there was a big problem, it would get quite nasty. And a lot of my teaching colleagues would say, I don't know how you can cope with that. I say, do you know how I can cope with it? Because you see that guy, he's really angry, isn't he? I said, I know exactly what he's thinking because he's telling me. And I think that's why I loved working with the pop guys, because you know, you can handle the truth, to misquote the X-Files, but you can handle the truth. And I think once you know the truth, and then you say, okay, so you're feeling this, all right, okay, so what about if we tried this? And they go, yeah. Then you find solutions much more quickly than if you aren't, if you pretend that everything's okay, or you go, So I love it. I think that's something which, it's one of the other things I wanted to talk about actually, was the fact that the experimentation that we did in terms of teaching and some of the techniques within music was much quicker, because we would experiment with stuff and we would, if it didn't work, we'd change it. And if it did work, we'd do it, and we'd add it, we'd change it again just to make it even better, to the point where it was just constantly changing. People would complain, we'd change it. Whereas I think in other departments and other areas, people are frightened to get things wrong, whereas we just danced all over the wrong. Had a disco with it.
Had a disco. And so how many years did you do at Bath College in total?
19.
19 years.
Yeah, I was 2001. I started. I thought, I came out of secondary school teaching, and I found that very difficult because every week I teach about 450 different children, and you cannot make meaningful connections with that many people. And I think when I joined the pop course, yes, it was in my face like I'd never experienced before, but at least you could make some really good connections. And I loved that. I really did. And also the fact that you get to concentrate on, people who are mostly passionate about music as well. Mostly, not all.
Yeah, no, that was the other thing as well, is that, you apply to join this course because presumably you are passionate about music and you want to explore your creativity and learn more and open up your mind. It definitely opened up my mind a lot to other genres of music, and just generally having a respect for all music, which not sure I had when I went into college, because I was very much in this like, oh yeah, punk rock and metal or nothing, man, sort of thing. And then, you guys would, I remember you specifically introduced the class, but then by default me, to John Martin, and just other things. And every week it was just like, being forced, being,
forced.
being forced to look at the Beatles, to figure out their history, their roots, their this, their that, and then look at like John Martin, May You Never, or whatever. And it sort of forces you to put them under the microscope and really appreciate the different components, and where they've maybe stolen a little lick from a rock and roll song, or maybe there's something in your specialist genre that you love that is sort of a nod to that, or kind of mimics that in some way, and how it all just sort of webs and connects, and it's bloody great.
Well, I think, one of the things I learned really when teaching is if you discover something and you're passionate about it, you need to share it, because I think it's going to sound a bit woo-woo, a bit kind of way out, but I think that when you go on a journey of discovery, and something new, and you discover it, and it's really exciting, and it really has a deep, heartfelt thing for you. You have to share it when you have that. And so often I would just share things and think, okay, because I've got such a strong passion for this now, I'm going to share it with you. I think that passion and that inspiration then will transfer. I never would say to myself, oh yeah, okay, I've discovered this John Martin piece. Okay, well, in 8 months' time, when that comes up in the scheme, I'll play it to the students. I'll be like, no, I'm doing it now.
Yeah.
And because it's that immediacy. And I mean, you guys gave me that immediacy, and I felt like actually I need to give that back to you as well.
Right. Yeah. They were great days, absolutely great days. And I sort of, I definitely wouldn't have done many of the things I've done since then if I hadn't gone to Bath College and we didn't have those gigs every week and we didn't have the time to develop our chops. The academic side of it was never really my massive forte, as you know, as you've spent hours with me, keeping me on task, but writing coursework and I've sent you messages in private about that, thanking you very much for the time and effort you did invest in me, and to be sentimental, I will always love and respect you for that deeply. But let's get into writing a book. You sit there and you go, right, I'm going to write this book. Here's the concept. You're also teaching at the same time as you're writing it, aren't you? Which is an undertaking of magnificent proportions, I think.
Well, I think it took a couple of years, before I finished it and before it was ready to kind of be published. But what I found was that I started off very confident with it, and then I started to think, okay, maybe I can't do this. And it was very interesting because performance was something that I really struggled with massively. And I would be very, very nervous, and it would cripple me and it would really kind of nobble me. And to some extent, even while I was teaching you guys, I still had those fears, but I knew I couldn't share them. And also knew that when I went wrong, I felt I couldn't get back. And if you look at some of the other members of the team, they were very, very confident musicians. They were professional musicians, like Rob Wilson and, Rob Bryan and Duncan and, all of the other kind of top musicians. But I didn't have the same background. So for me, I've always felt like I had to do things in order to be able to perform that. And there are some people who can't tell you much about confidence and performing because they always have been confident. They can't share it because they didn't learn it. And so I just decided that and there is no one way that everyone's going to do this. So I decided, okay, sometimes I just recalled, like the person who said, I can't get on stage. And that was one chapter. And I would put it into little chapters and record specific things about recording, or it might be something about feeling not going out to get gigs and just getting paralyzed or not being able to write something. And so every single chapter I just thought, dip into it. And very few people I know who've bought it or borrowed it or read it or have been gifted it. They haven't read it from cover to cover. There's only a few people that have, because that's not the way I intended it to be written.
Did you intend it not to be finished?
Well, I nearly didn't finish it because, we had a couple of colleagues who left, and I had to sort of take over and do lots more work. And actually, I was telling you about this sharing something while it's fresh, while it's inspired. And I think after 2 years, the inspiration can die a little bit. And I think it is hard. Starting it and getting to about halfway through was easy, but then finishing it was difficult. And funnily enough, what I learned through the process was that confidence is situational. So yes,
Right.
I conquered an awful lot of my confidence issues with music and performing it, but not for things like public speaking and various other stuff. So I went to do a promotional thing, and somebody said, "Oh, come and do this thing." It was a big hall, and the night before I got absolutely wasted and completely sabotaged it because I was so nervous. But because I'd written this book, I'm not nervous, and I was and I was so ill, I could barely do it because I just sabotaged it. And I think I sort of realised that actually it's a lifelong. Just because I've written a book, it's probably, it doesn't mean that I've overcome confidence. I know how to overcome it, but in different situations, I'm going to have the same problem.
Right.
I think as we all do.
Yeah.
So
you felt that because you've written a book called How to Become a Confident Performer, there was a pressure on you, I guess, that you felt that the people who'd come to see you talk about the book and promote the book would expect you to be infallible and the consummate professional and just the pinnacle of security and confidence.
Yeah, and precision, like, oh yeah, he never makes mistake kind of vibe, but actually, if in the book I talk a lot about, I don't care if I make mistakes. I really don't. So, and I did a colleague passed away before Christmas, and I did a Zoom remembrance service, and I wrote a song and played it, and I presented and hosted it and everything, and a lot of those skills are practiced, and I don't feel that fear. And one of the biggest ways to overcome that fear, I think, for me is people. It's doing things for people and with people. So, and then it has a meaning, and it has a purpose, and therefore I don't feel that nerves in any way, shape or form as much as I would have done.
Right. And so fast forwarding from the book quite a few years, I'm in the van or wherever. I'm somewhere on the road with my band Sick Ones, and I'm in the front, and I'm chatting to Ben Kurd, who's the former vocalist now, and he says, "Oh, Andy, I've started this thing called Toastmasters, and there's a guy there who says that he knows you." I was like, "Oh, okay, who's that?" And he's, "Oh, it's Clive Stocker." And I was like, "Oh my God, I love Clive. Oh my God." And I was like, "Oh, I'm so glad you've met Clive," because I'd probably talked about you or something, when I was talking about college days in the van and that. And I was like, "Oh, I'm so chuffed that you'd met Ben," because I love Ben so much, and he's got such a great attitude towards learning and overcoming and testing and challenging himself. And watching him become a front man that didn't really know if he wanted to be one, to having his shirt off, being ripped and sweaty and holding court in front of, a few hundred people and having them in the palm of his hand within a matter of sort of years, was really a great journey to see. And then I was so pleased that he was like going in again, an extra step again in Toastmasters, and that your paths had crossed, because I knew that, he wouldn't let you guys down, and that, and he'd do really well. And I was just so pleased that you guys had made that connection. Can you tell me a bit about what Toastmasters is? Because it was such a strange idea when he said it to me. He was like, "Yeah, well, you go, and it's like, you're all in a group and you have to make speeches, and it's all about how to become a confident." Would the word be like a raconteur?
I don't know. I think it can be a presenter is one thing. Being somebody who gives speeches is slightly different, and but certainly being an MC and presenting it or hosting an evening,
right?
Those have been very, very useful skills, and certainly if I want to give a speech, then I know how how to write it, I know how to prepare it, and I know how to deliver it. So I think those things within Toastmasters are fantastic skills. And I only joined it because somebody came along to a free workshop that I did on public speaking, because I thought, how difficult can it be? Because I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for 20 years.
Yeah.
Or at that point, I think for about 18 years. It's no different. I stand on my feet. I stand in front of people, and I give speeches every single day. And yes, I do. But there is a whole other side to it that I naively believed that didn't exist, and it really does. So I think, again, had I had those skills, and when I went and promoted my book, it would have been a very different story. And I think it's part of the reason I stopped promoting my book, because I didn't have the skills and I didn't have the confidence, and I was just, really struggling with that. Yeah. So
tell me the processes that you guys go through to sort of build, okay, let's use this as a sort of a virtual workshop for a moment, okay? I am currently at the time of this recording, I am Froom's acting mayor. I am the deputy mayor of Froome now, and I'm doing my deputy role while the mayor is recovering from some surgery. Now, the other night I had to chair my very first full council meeting. Now, it wasn't in person, it was on Zoom, and I'd never chaired a meeting ever before. And I had the apprehension and the sort of very faint, nervous little butterflies beforehand, knowing that I was going to have to do it. But I didn't give it too much thought, because I thought, well, in my job, it's essentially a bit of a stage, because I work in a customer service, so there's a stage element to it. I've done the touring around the world, playing to all kinds of people, and that's a stage. And I've had radio shows, and that's a stage. And I've got a podcast, and that's also a stage of some description. I didn't really think about it. I didn't let it eat at me, that sort of like that little nervous thing. And then when the moment came, and it was like, okay, Andy, this, you're on, green light. And I had a little script I had to read out at the beginning. I felt a nervousness and almost a little panic that I haven't felt for years. It was, when your mind gets a bit fast and your breathing becomes a little irregular, you can feel your heart going a bit. It was this sudden moment of pressure at the beginning of, all eyes are on you now. And this is a serious forum. It's a full council meeting. You have to deliver. And it kind of took me back a bit, and it took me a few minutes after I'd done read out the script. It took me a few minutes while people were chatting and doing, the meeting was underway, to really kind of process what just happened to me, because it's been a very long time since I felt that form of nervousness. And I'm now thinking, okay, well, if I become the actual mayor in May, or whenever we appoint a new one, I will have to write speeches. I've never done any speeches. I'm not worried about the chairing thing anymore, because I've done it once now and it was okay. I get it, and I'm in it now. But the speech thing and the public speaking thing, I think I've naively thought, well, I do this anyway. You know what I mean? I do this anyway. I live on a stage. But it's very different, isn't it? The context is very, very different, and they're different sets of skills. It's not enough to just be a confident person or be used to crowds, is it? It's something different. So how would you prepare me for my role as mayor of Froome? What would you suggest?
Well, I think, part of the thing that I sort of realised with Toastmasters, and the Toastmasters is it's been around for about 70 or 80 years. It was formulated in America, I believe, and it really has two elements to it. It has a leadership element to it. So people, you learn to run meetings, and you also learn to impromptu speaking. You learn to interview other people. You also learn skills about what they call rhetorical devices. So you may have noticed that while I've been talking, I try, if I get to a point and I want to emphasize it, then I'll bring out three things. So it could be that I'm going to, if I want to talk about, the importance of Toastmasters, I would say, well, the three things that really changed my life with Toastmasters are the ability to stand up and make an impact, to structure all of the things that I'm going to say, and thirdly, have that formality so that people really take me seriously. So, when I make those 3 points, I just thought of those off the top of my head, they make you sound much more authoritative. And usually, to be honest, if you have 3 elements to something, you've probably covered, as long as they're different, you've probably covered enough of it to give people an understanding. So what would I say? Well, first of all, think about the purpose of what you're going to be doing. And, if you think, okay, when I led the meetings, I started and I used to kind of go off on a tangent and people would shout at me, stick to the agenda. And actually they don't want this kind of super amazingly intricate, clever comedian. They want somebody who's going to lead this bloody meeting.
Right.
And they want it to, they want to be out that door by 8:30. They don't want to be farting about listening to anecdotes. So, and I think that think about the purpose of what you want to say. And the other thing to remember is nobody says, well, he did a brilliant speech. I loved it, but it was a bit short. Nobody ever says that.
Right.
They'll say, I loved it, but they'll kick off if you go over. So I think that's the other thing. Think about your purpose, structure it, keep it brief, and get off the stage. That's it.
And what do you tell yourself before you go on to do something? If you feel those, that you feel that the magnification of sort of eyes and pressure building, the sooner you come to your moment, is there anything that you say to yourself? Maybe a mantra, or maybe there's a reassuring line that you have in your head that you go, well, you know what, we've got this and we've done this before, and remember you're this and this, and you're going to be fine. Is there anything that goes through your head?
Absolutely, yeah, every time. Doesn't matter if it's music, if it's speaking, or if it's teaching. It's one thing. It's really, why is this important? And that's it. So, if it's a piece of music, okay, why is this this piece of music important to me? And, when I was performing at that remembrance sort of Zoom remembrance thing, and I wrote the song and I performed it, and it was really difficult to get through and I thought, well, why am I doing this? It's because he was a great guy and we really miss him and I want people to hear this. And, if it's a speech, I will only speak about things that I feel strongly about, that I want to share. And I think, that's it. Have a strong purpose, have something to say, and then, okay, I might mess it up, but at least I'll be focused on why I'm doing it and the purpose and what I want to get across. So I think for me, and the rest are skills, but even when I have meetings at work and I have a new job and I have to do a lot of meetings, and the Toastmasters is absolutely brilliant experience for that. But I do think, okay, what do I want to get across? Why am I talking about this? Why is it on the agenda? And I only put things on there that I feel quite strongly about. And if I can't, again, I know you have you interviewed Mr. Rob Bryan yet?
I haven't yet. No, I'm doing, at the time of this recording, I should be doing Rob tomorrow evening. But I don't know what order these podcasts will come out in. So maybe his episode will be out by the time you're hearing this. Maybe it's not. Spoiler alert, Rob Bryan, professional drummer extraordinaire, is on the way, or he's been, or whichever one. If you haven't seen it, it's coming out. If you haven't heard it, check it out.
But he's I learned a lot from him because I interviewed him a couple of times for the book, and I said, "You got any advice?" And you can ask him about this when you interview him if you haven't already. Love everything. That's the advice. He says, yes. Love everything.
And I know what you're going to say, Clive, because you told us what he said to you, or you told me, and I've remembered it. So you said to him, okay, how do you do this when the piece of music you're being paid to play may not necessarily be something that you're excited about or is really doing you, really hitting you in the spot? And he said to you, I might misquote it slightly or paraphrase it, I listen to it and I listen to it and I listen to it until I love it.
Absolutely. And it's such good advice. And if we go back to, how we deal with difficult people, is that we need to understand them. We need to take more time to understand them and work out who they are and love them. Yeah. And a lot of the time people say, okay, you just need to put up with it and just put on a brave face, bite your lip. And actually I think, no, that's a disservice. I think, you owe it to dig deep and find it in yourself, to love that person, really make a connection with them. So I think, I think that's the thing. It's if somebody asks you to talk about something you don't necessarily be... I gave somebody at Toastmasters, I said, right, give me a subject that you would hate to do a speech on. And he said, got just the one, health and safety. And I said, okay, yeah, I'll do it. And I won an award because I made it. I thought, how can I make this fun and exciting? And I did. So, and it's about that. Learn to love everything.
Right. That's really interesting. There was something you said to me once when we were working on some coursework. It was just me and you. And what you said kind of rocked me because I didn't have any concept of what you said before you said it to me. You said, Andy, I think you have the highest emotional intelligence of any student I've seen. And I was like, first of all, I thought, what is emotional intelligence? And then you sort of explained it to me. How important is emotional intelligence when you're speaking to an audience or teaching, when you said you have to understand them, you have to love these people, and you have to, how important is that? Does this set me in good stead? Given what you said, does this bode well for me, or does this mean I'm going to feel things much more deeply, and it could be extra obstacles?
Oh, that's a really good question, because I think if you having that emotional intelligence, I mean, there are people who have extremely high emotional intelligence, and they're very empathetic, and to them it's they don't know how to use it, because what people think is, okay, if they can detect that somebody's feeling bad, that they should change the way they do it and stop what they're doing, and or not do it. And I don't think you're like that. I think you realise, you can see it written on your face when you've supported other people in their band, and you've noticed that there's a bit of a problem between two people. You don't stop. You don't just suddenly give up. You are aware of it, and then you work with it. And I think that is the strength. It's one thing to have it, but also to think, okay, well, I'm gonna be aware of it, and I'm going to do something with it, and I'm going to do my best. And I think that's the difference, because some people either don't have the emotional intelligence, or they have the emotional intelligence, but they don't know what to do with it. And you'll always know what to do with it and how to help other people. And then you say, well, look, we have got to perform. We have got to do that gig. So, so you're not giving in, but you're being aware, and there's a difference. I think it's a real asset, and the more tools that you learn, having that knowledge will be brilliant.
Right. Do you think like you said, going back to the manipulation, which is inherent in teaching, do you think as you said there, the ability to emotionally recognize what's happening and work with it, do you think to a degree that is the form of manipulation which is sort of key in teaching, is to realize, okay, this is the situation, and how do we mold how we approach this to get the right outcome from this individual?
Well, it's a difficult one, because I think the more techniques you learn and the manipulations that you learn, the more able you are to manipulate people. But the key thing is to make sure that you always think, okay, what does that person want? What do they need? And are they aware of what they need? And, because, they say, oh, you can, take the horse to water, but you can't make them drink it. Well, I think they may not want to drink it, and that's their choice. So I think there's a real balance between having those skills and manipulating them. I mean, sometimes I've thought, okay, after I've sort of got somebody to do some work, and I think actually they don't really want to do that. They don't really want to do this course. And sometimes when somebody's made a decision that actually 2/3 of the way through the course, they don't really want to be a musician, and they hate the playthroughs, and actually they'll be glad to get out of this place. And you do manipulations, and it feels wrong because you know that they've made that decision to not do it. And I think that's hard. That's hard.
Because obviously with that, it's Spider-Man, with that power of, knowing how to steer and manipulate and perhaps use some psychological tricks here and there to get people to, a goal, comes a lot of responsibility to use those skills and that insight for benevolent reasons rather than to your own gain, or that of because you could use those skills to drive up the average pass merit score or something of the course and please the board of directors or whatever the governing bodies are. But you're dealing with humans, aren't you? And yeah, and so it's an interesting sort of line to tread, isn't it?
It is, and that manipulation is, it's at best it's going to be a relatively short, what's the word? Adherence. So they're only going to do it for a while, and so yes, there's the saying, isn't there? You can fool some of the people some of the time, and you can fool some of the people all of the time, but you can't fool all the people all of the time. And I think it's the same with the manipulations in, for example, I'll give you, people are probably wondering, what the hell is he talking about? Manipulation, what does he mean? What does it mean? Well, for example, I remember we had a load of stuff to move, and there was a whole load of like the tech guys, and it was kind of every now and again you get a group that maybe love going to the gym. So they're all kind of like, beefed up and really muscly with those kind of vests and various things and looking very muscular. And I needed some help. And I said, guys, are those, those muscles you've got, are they just for show? And they went, no. I said, oh, great. Come and give me a hand. And so they did. But and it was a manipulation, but it was only a short-term manipulation because I knew that they wouldn't want to help me, and if I asked them directly to help me, they wouldn't help me. So it's just manipulations. I think, yeah.
You're a master of the dark arts, Clive, I think.
Well, yeah, I suppose so. Because I think there's a lot of pressure to, like you said, to get people through, and and yes, that you're right. Sometimes it does make it a dark art because people, you think, well, they're 2/3 of the way through. The best thing for them to do is to finish the course, but they don't really want to, and that's hard.
Yeah. And it's recognizing that, isn't it? And I guess your instinct is to not let people fall behind. But sometimes, I guess, and that will probably be something that comes from great experience and years on the job, is that sometimes I think I'm not naming any names, but I can think of people that were on the courses with us who were just there to waste time and not get a job, I think. And I think that, or not, go into the real world, quote unquote. And there's a lot of people there that really didn't have any business being there, really, from a musical point of view. And I think, you got to learn when to go, okay, I'm going to have to let this one go, because if I spend any more effort on this one, there's someone else over here that really does need it and will benefit from it. And I guess it's the figuring out where you put your energies, isn't it? And knowing when it's time to call it a day with someone and say, all right, well, we've tried, and I'm confident now that this is dead in the water.
I know it is hard because, a lot of people's nature is to try reasonably and then give up, with those people. And actually, when you're an educator, you can never give up on them. And, it is hard. Sometimes you do everything you can, and then you get to the end of the course and you just wave them goodbye, and say, I wish you all the best. And, I've coached people for teaching, and sometimes I say that there are some students who you never find out who they really are and what their real motivations are. And it's, but they don't, but you shouldn't stop trying,
right,
to find that out.
It's that line from that film, some men you just can't reach.
That is it. That is exactly what it is, and it's and women as well.
Yeah, and women. Yeah, sorry, Clive. It seems that there's a theme with you that all throughout your life, you find something that scares you. And you look it in the eye and you work on it, and you put some real concerted effort into overcoming this obstacle, or at least becoming comfortable and being able to coexist with the feelings that it gives you. What's next?
Good. That's a good question. I think probably another book, because I trained teachers now for 5 years, and coached teachers and sort of adults. And I did think, I can probably write a book after about a year or two of doing it. I really couldn't, because when the Confident Performer happened, I'd been teaching music for about 15, 16 years, and I'd been a musician, one way or another since I was 10, and I thought, okay, I haven't got enough to write it now, but I think I have, in the next year or two, I think it'll be about how to be the confident teacher.
How to be the confident teacher, that's great. And are you going to be using any new techniques to write this? Are you going to be drawing upon techniques that you've described previously in your other book? Or is this a whole new... I guess if you're writing a book on it, it has a whole new ballgame attached to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the difficult thing is that there's been lots of books, academic books, written about teaching. There haven't been that many books written about nerves and confident performing as musicians. There's a few, and some of them are good, and some of them I can't actually get through them. I don't like the way they're written, but there's been loads on teaching, so I think that's going to be hard. But every now and again, I think, I talk to colleagues or coach people, and I think, blimey, this is a concept which is from my book. So some of them do actually have a real thing, like musical things. Like if I said to you, you're going to play, the first time you're going to play the Hollywood Bowl, and there's like, I don't know how many thousand people there. What song would you open with? A new one, or one that's kind of like you like, and you've been playing it for quite a while?
Well, the instinct would tell you to go with one that you've been playing for a while, because you want to get warmed up. You want to figure out any little bugs in the live audio mixing and things like that. Anything that may come up, you want to be as deeply in your comfort zone as possible, I would say, instinctually, so that if something does go wrong, you can sail through it, hopefully without anyone noticing. Not that they ever really do, I've found, but it still doesn't stop you being terrified of it. But I have a feeling that you're going to say something about the other option that's far more interesting.
No, I'd go with your advice. Because you want it to go well, and for all the other reasons, because you're adapting to that situation. So I think, teaching is the same. Go with something start with something you feel confident with, that makes you feel comfortable, makes other people feel comfortable. And once you get to know the group, then you can do it. But, I use manipulations if I change that. But essentially, no, I'd go with it. So I think, there are concepts, and I put that in the book, and that's what I would say to teachers. Start with something that you feel confident with.
Right.
So, yeah, there is a lot of crossover.
That reminds me of, I saw Radiohead at Glastonbury. I'm not sure what the year was now. It was the most recent year that they'd headlined it. It must have been two years ago, maybe. I'm not sure. COVID has completely ruined my concept of years. But they came on in the first 40 minutes of their set. No hits, no big singles, really almost experimental, beat-driven, avant-garde to a degree, art rock. And I remember being stood in the crowd thinking, I want Karma Police and I want Creep. And I want, the other ones, I want them, and I want them now. I want my sing-alongs. But there was another part of me that was thinking, oh, this is such a big energy move. This is just a real statement. They've come out on a headline slot, Glastonbury Festival. They know the world is watching. They know the BBC is broadcasting it. And they have decided to use the first 40 minutes to do whatever the hell they wanted and please them first as musicians before us. And it's a bit of an arrogant move, but there was something in the confidence of doing that I thought was very impressive.
I think they are very confident musicians for sure. And I think they have to do something that's slightly different, don't they? They always have done. They've always been the first to do various things, and they've always been big on the, with the digital sort of laws about music and copyright. They've always been there, haven't they? Yeah. At the forefront, either fighting it or suggesting things. So, I think, they're not your average musicians, are they? I think they are definitely, good to them, because they probably, in their minds, they probably think, okay, I really believe in this. Yeah, I'm going to do this, and they have that confidence. If it comes from within, otherwise you end up. You could say, people who do different things are innovative, and they are the trailblazers. Yeah. So maybe we should do it.
I think they've become a new archetype. I think Radiohead were a new archetype band, and they continue to challenge that concept of themselves, I think. But what happened, interestingly, with that is when they did get round to playing the big sing-along hits, I struggled to think, other than Foo Fighters and some others, I really struggled to think of a headline set at Glastonbury where it felt more euphoric to be, because they they left you hanging for it. You had to, it's not like, oh, we're not just going to come out and give you a single. Do you know what I mean? That was their way of filtering out the casuals, and there was about 15, 20 minutes in, and my mate looked at me and he was like, oh, mate, should we go? And I was like, no, because by the time we get out of this massive crowd, it's going to be over anyway. So we might as well just stick with it, and I was glad that we stuck with it, because when they did finally give us what we wanted, it was that anticipation, that they built. It's like, oh, they're going to do one next that we know. They're going to do one next, and they didn't. And then when they did, it was like, oh, yes, give it to me, yes. That's one of the only times I've seen a band do it like that, to have that confidence to not open with a hit just to make sure they're playing to a home crowd.
It's a risky approach,
It's
isn't
very
it?
risky, very, very risky. Let's start wrapping this up, Clive. I want to ask you, in closing, who are some performers and public speakers who you really, now that you feel that you know the mechanics and the nuts and bolts of performing and public speaking, who are the ones that you look at and you think, wow, those guys are really inspiring? And I can see, because I'm fascinated by stand-up comedians a lot and how they structure what they do and how they operate. And again, that will be a whole other theatre to a speech writing a speech or hosting a chairing a meeting, let's say. It's a whole other ball game. But who are the people you look at and you go, wow, they are fantastic. I don't know how they do it as well as they do, and so effortlessly.
I think, the stand-up comedian stuff is really interesting, because I've done some comedy competitions for Toastmasters, and it's one of the most difficult things I've ever done, because the first time you do it, you get an amazing buzz from it, you get a few laughs, and then the next time you do it, you don't, because you're rehearsed, and there's a point where it works and it has an honesty, and comedy needs to have an honesty, otherwise it dies. And it goes like this: it goes honesty, complete insincerity, where they just sound like they're reading the lines, and they're waiting for the laughs, and then they work through it and they keep going. And I think I was listening to, well, the person that I think has probably most impressed me with the comedy is definitely Paul Chowdhury.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen him. He's on, I think they've got a performance of him on Amazon Prime, and he's very close to the mark, but his timing, the way that he connects with the audience, and the way he breaches that and goes into the audience, brings the audience in, then insults them, and then has dialogues with, and it's just, I mean, for me as a public speaker and maybe a fairly new one compared to him, I mean, it is just amazing and magical to see him, the way that he does it. And you just think, oh my God, some of the material is so wrong, and yet he gets away with it. So I think definitely that as a public performer. And again, like I said to you, it's things that have inspired me fairly recently, but that was probably about a year ago I saw that, and I still remember it. So there's that. And musicians, I don't know who, I suppose, I think one of my, there's Keith Jarrett.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever heard it, but he did this thing, the Cologne concert. And what he did, he had a upset stomach. He went to Cologne, not to get rid of his upset stomach, because it's a long way to go, isn't it? But he had to do this concert, and they had a grand piano. It was freezing, and one of the notes was about a tune, and he didn't feel well, but he sat down at the piano and he improvises his whole 2-hour set based on whatever he starts with. And there's just something in it. There's a whole journey. There's a whole narrative, an improvisation, and he takes you on this massive journey. And it's that for me, it's that nothing about it is prepared, and he just goes on this journey, and you're with him right to the end, and it's even, I don't know, 40 or 50 years later, it's still grabbing me.
Thank you so much to my esteemed guest, Clive Stocker, for spending some time with me and catching up after so many years on this week's episode of The Giant Pod. We will leave various links to Clive's book and music and other bits and bobs that we find in the show notes descriptions, so please make sure you go and check those out. Please like, subscribe, leave a review. If you could just share this with one friend that you think may benefit from this conversation, please do. That really, really does help us grow. If you want to follow The Giant Pod on social media, you can. The Twitter and the Instagram is at The Giant Pod. My Instagram is Andy_S1S. This podcast was produced by the Toastmaster himself, Harry Williams. We will see you next week on The Giant Pod. Thank you very much. Hear, hear.